Rogers Brown and Thomas Griffith to the 10th and 11th judgeships on the D.C. Circuit. Mr. President, I ask order in the Senate, please.
Chamber will be in order.
Back in 2005, when the Senate confirmed the 10th and 11th judgeships in the D.C. Circuit, they were the choices of the Republican side of the aisle. Even though these confirmations, which we approve, reduce the court's workload to fewer cases per active judge than what we see as President Obama sends his nominees to the Senate. On April 5th, the Judicial Conference of the United States, which is led by Chief Justice John Roberts, made its federal judgeship recommendations for the 113th Congress. The Judicial Conference is nonpartisan, and according to its letter, its recommendations reflect the judgeship needs of the federal judiciary. The Judicial Conference did not recommend stripping any judgeships from the D.C. Circuit, so this argument on the other side of the aisle is not supported by the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court Justice and this committee. My Republican colleagues like to argue about workload statistics when it comes to the D.C. Circuit, but according to the Washington Post fact-checker Glenn Kessler, whom I've come to know, quote, the voluminous and detailed statistics on the appeals courts allows each side to pick and choose the stats that support their position. Now, Republicans may claim that D.C. Circuit's workload is too light, but Mr. Kessler in the Washington Post points out that by some metrics, the D.C. Circuit, quote, could very well be in first place when it comes to workload. I also note that one of my Republican colleagues came to the floor today and explained his opposition to Ms. Millet's nomination. In doing so, he cited a letter the Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats sent in 2006 seeking a hearing postponement on Peter Keisler, nominated to fill the 11th seat on the D.C. Circuit. I'd like to point out this letter dealt with filling the 11th seat on the D.C. Circuit. Ms. Millett is seeking the 9th seat. I also want to point out the Senate had already voted to confirm a nominee to be the 11th judge on that circuit, Thomas Griffith, just 1 year before this 2006 letter. I voted for Mr. Griffith on the floor. The bottom line is that these judicial vacancies currently exist. It's the President's job to nominate qualified men and women to fill them, and there is no question that the President's nominee for this position, Patricia Millett, is one of the most well-qualified persons that he could have found to fill this important position. No one comes forward to criticize her background and her resume because, frankly, it's hard to find a nominee with any stronger credentials for the federal bench. Let's not play political games with this important nomination, nor with people like Patricia Millett, who put their names forward, gone through this process, waited for us politicians to work our will on the floor. She deserves a vote, an up or down vote. And without objection, I'd like to have consent to enter into the record the letter from Illinois lawyers supporting Patricia Millett for the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, as well as the personal letter of October 24th from former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, Patrick Fitzgerald of Chicago.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I rise to join my colleague, Senator Durbin, from Illinois, in support of Patricia Millett's nomination to the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals. As he said so eloquently, Ms. Millett has broad bipartisan support, extensive public and private sector litigation experience, and she would make an outstanding addition to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. After graduating with honors from the University of Illinois and Harvard Law School, Ms. Millett clerked at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She then spent 15 years at the Department of Justice, including 11 years as assistant to the Solicitor General in both Republican and Democratic administrations. And again, I think it's important to point out she has support on both sides of the aisle. Ms. Millett has argued 32 cases before the Supreme Court, as well as dozens of others at the circuit court level, and she currently manages her law firm's Supreme Court and national appellate practice. She was unanimously rated well qualified by the American Bar Association's Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary, and that is their highest rating. In addition to her professional work, Ms. Millett is very active in her community. She's been a literacy tutor for over 20 years, and she volunteers through her church at homeless shelters. Ms. Millett has strong support across the political spectrum. Again, as Senator Durbin pointed out, she's been endorsed by 7 former Solicitors General of the United States, 3 former Republican Attorneys General, law enforcement groups, and civil rights groups. She also has tremendous support from retired members of the military and groups representing military families. In addition to being a highly qualified nominee, Ms. Millett will fill one of 3 current vacancies on the 11-member D.C. Circuit Court. As Senator Durbin pointed out, the D.C. Circuit is considered the 2nd most important court in our nation. It is critical that it be fully staffed with qualified judges. The court handles important terrorism and detention cases. It hears a large volume of complex issues involving administrative actions of the federal government. And the D.C. Circuit is also considered the most important civilian court for members of the armed services and veterans. Former D.C. Circuit Chief Judge Patricia Wald noted, quote, "The D.C. Circuit hears the most complex, time-consuming, labyrinthine disputes over regulations with the greatest impact on ordinary Americans' lives: clean air and water regulations, nuclear plant safety, health care reform issues, insider trading, and more." The Senate should have the opportunity to vote up or down on all of President Obama's nominees to this important court. It is way past time we took action on this nomination. I urge my colleagues to support the Millett nomination and yield the floor, Mr. President. Absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection, so ordered.
I now ask unanimous consent that as if in executive session, the nomination of Rhea Sun Soo of Colorado to be Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife sent to the President on October 30th, 2013 be referred jointly to the Committee on Energy, Natural Resources, and the Committee on Environment and Public Works.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S. 1561, calendar number 228.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 228, S. 1561, a bill to amend the Public Health Service Act to improve provisions relating to the sanctuary system for surplus chimpanzees.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask the committee report a substitute amendment be agreed to. The bill as amended be read a third time passed. Motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to H.R. 3190.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 3190, an act to provide for the continued performance of the functions of the United States Parole Commission and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the bill be read three times passed. Motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table, and there be no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask permission to proceed to S.Res. 278.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 278, designating October 2013 as School Bus Safety Month.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to H. Conres 62.
The clerk will report.
H. Conres 62, providing for a conditional adjournment of the House of Representatives.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, it adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, October 31st, and that following the prayer and the pledge, morning hour be deemed expired. During the proceedings be approved to date. Time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. And the following any leader remarks, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the Watt nomination with the time at 12 noon, equally divided and controlled between the two leaders of the designees. At noon, Senator-elect Booker will be sworn, and so I ask consent that following the swearing in of Senator-elect Booker, that time he'll be a senator, there will be 2 minutes of debate, equally divided and controlled in the usual form prior to a cloture vote on the Watt nomination.
Without objection, so ordered.
First roll call vote will be approximately 12:10 p.m. tomorrow on the motion to invoke cloture on the nomination of Mel Watt to be a director of the Federal Housing and Financing Agency. If there is no further business come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
The Senate's gabbled out, but earlier today, members voted to confirm the nomination of Alan Estevez to be the head of logistics operations at the Defense Department. The chamber also debated and voted on 2 other executive branch nominations during the day. Tomorrow, debate and a procedural vote on the nomination of former Congressman Mel Watt to lead the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Follow the Senate live here on C-SPAN 2 when members return Thursday.